and then it takes you to our online school, and there's 4 gates, 4 doorways there. There is Buddhist basics, everyday practice, and deeper study, depending on your preference for the day. And I also wanted to mention that on January 13th, our Honko special service guest speaker is going to be Reverend Dr. David Matsumoto from IBS. He's an incredible resource, and you really want to hear him speak. And after the Honko special service, he's going to teach a seminar, a BEC class, from 1 to 3 p.m. And a lot of people have asked, how come we can't register online? I don't want to write a check. You know, I told you my son and daughter are millennials. Tink told me, I've told you this, he told me, I don't have checks. I'm not writing a check. And he said, I'm not putting it in an envelope. I don't have stamps. So if you go to the website, you can register for the Honko special BEC class that day, and it's under the button Deeper Study. So if you go there and you register for $10, you have access to the class in person, and as an extra bonus, you have access to all the online content when it gets loaded. So I'm going to press the Buddhist Basic button right now, because that's all I know. I just know Buddhist Basic. So these are the classes that come up. They're filtered. These are the Buddhist Basic classes. And then the one in the middle is from Siddhartha to Shakyamuni, A Personal Story of Awakening. So I'm going to press that button. So this is what it looks like when you watch the video. And there's a little square down here in the bottom right-hand corner. That's me talking. So what they say is that most people really don't want to see the instructor. The audio has to be really good, but it's not so important how good I look. So that's why I'm like small in the corner. So I wanted to talk about Prince Siddhartha and his quest to realize awakening on December 8th under the Bodhi tree. And this is celebrated by all Buddhist traditions, but it's on a lot of different days. And I've given this talk at different temples, and the Dharma school teachers have corrected me. And they're always right, because they teach Dharma school and I don't. But it's confusing, because different traditions celebrate on different days. So for us, Bodhi Day, when the Buddha became enlightened at 35, December 8th. So this is Prince Siddhartha here in front. I know how to do red circles now. So this is Prince Siddhartha, young, strong, virile. I use the analogy to King Henry VIII. He's trained in archery, martial arts, swordsmanship. He is a warrior, a soldier in line to become the king. This is what he's trained for his whole life, and this is the caste he was born into, right? So you don't really have a choice in a caste system. If you're born into the warrior caste, when you grow up, that's your trade, you're going to be a warrior. In America, we don't really have this so much. It happens a lot, but it's not because of a caste. Like, my dad was one of the first people to work on computers in the 50s, and then I went into computer science and math, and Emily's gone into math, but it's not our caste. There's no math caste. So this is Prince Siddhartha, and then right here is his father, King Suddhodana. A military man, kind of strict. I think he loved his son deeply, but was probably nonverbal. It's like his father was Patton. Serious military man, a lot of responsibilities. And then this is his mother, Queen Maya, his mother, died after he was born, a week after he was born. If I made that mistake, the Dharma school teachers would have been on me. So this is not his, it's his stepmother, Mahapajapati. So this is Queen Maya's sister, Mahapajapati. She raises young Siddhartha from birth after his mother died. This is a very sad story. His mother died shortly after giving birth. And then this is Princess Yoshodhara, his wife-to-be. So, you know, there's the king, stepmother, princess-to-be, And then I taught this class online, and I just wanted to show you this real quick. If anybody out there, if any Dharma teacher knows this answer, you get to go to the Pure Land today. Do you see this little man down here? One of my students online said, what's the reflection of that man in that center column down on the bottom? I have no idea who this person is. I don't know if it's a ghost. It looks like a man. So I don't know. Maybe it's Devadatta, his evil cousin. I don't know who it is. So if anybody knows, see me after class. So I had to tell the person online, I don't know. So we've gone over this a little bit. On the upper left is King Suddhodana. I make a joke that he looks a lot like Freddie Mercury from Queen. But it's not. It's not Freddie Mercury. Nobody knows what the King Suddhodana looked like, but they kind of know what they wore. So, you know, he's got long royal hair. He's got a crown with a jewel on it. He's got expensive earrings. He's got an expensive necklace. He's got fine robes. This is Queen Maya, the birth mother of Prince Siddhartha, and then her sister, stepmother, Mahapajapati. And she is incredibly famous. She not only raised Siddhartha as if he was her own son, she's the woman who started the Buddhistic path for nuns, for female nuns. So she goes to the Buddha and says women should be ordained and in the monastic order just like men. And because it was his stepmom, he said, okay, you're right. And then this is Prince Siddhartha up on the upper left, and Princess Yashodhara, who he marries, and they have a son together, Rahula. So they're a happy family. He's in line to become a king, and he begins to... Prince Siddhartha seems to have the ability to kind of see through the facade. He would see through appearances. And I don't have time for this, but there's a lot of stories in the texts about Prince Siddhartha going to parties. And there's a lot of like bands and dancing women and servants. And by the end of the night, everybody's kind of haggard and the makeup's running and the hair's a mess. And I don't know, he begins to see that people put on a costume or a role they play in public. And he starts to feel a separation or a lack of authenticity in his life. So we talked about this a little bit at the All Life Forms Memorial Service. This is Prince Siddhartha being led on a chariot, and in front is, I know this is kind of small, but in front is his personal attendant, Chana. So he's so rich and famous, he gets his own personal attendant, right? This is like Mr. Bates on Downton Abbey, right? You have a valet. I told Linda I would love that, where they dress you in the morning, you know? And then that's his horse. Remember the white horse, Kantaka? The Buddha's favorite horse? So they go out of the castle, and they go out through the east gate. This is really important. They go through the east gate, and he first sees somebody old. So he was only hanging out with celebrities and rich and powerful and famous people. He'd never really seen anybody, you know, above 40 or 50. And he sees a very old man bent over, and he's kind of shocked. And he says to Chana, what's wrong with that guy? What happened to him? And Chana was like, kind of indignant and a little sarcastic. He said, he's old. He's just old. And Prince Siddhartha said, does everyone get old? And he was like, yeah, like, where have you been? And then Prince Siddhartha said, even rich and powerful people? And he said, yeah, this awaits all beings. It doesn't matter how rich and powerful you are. This is where we're all headed. And then a couple days later, they go out the southern gate, and they see somebody who's very ill and sick. Someone who is in really bad shape. And again, Siddhartha's never really seen anybody that had anything more than a head cold or the flu. And this person has like tuberculosis or leprosy, and this person is near death. And again, he says, does everybody get sick? And it's like, yeah, everyone. And I mean, even you, Prince Siddhartha, will get sick in your lifetime. And I used to kind of tell this story wrong. I thought the story was that as you grow up, once in a while you get sick, no big deal, and someday you'll die. But the story's a little bit more depressing. As you get older and older and older, you get sicker and sicker and sicker, and then you die. So it's kind of a little bit more depressing that way. It's not like, oh, you're going to get the flu when you're 30, and when you're 90, you'll die. It's a little bit more negative than that. So then they go out the west gate, and he actually sees someone who has died, who's no longer alive. And this was the first time he'd ever seen a corpse. And I could kind of relate to this because in the West, I never saw a corpse or a dead body before until I did a funeral at OCBC, and it was open casket. And so that was kind of I was nervous because I had to chant and I had to do a funeral, but it was like the first time I ever saw a dead person. So, this kind of story makes a lot of sense. This is hidden in the West. We don't see this kind of thing much anymore. So again, he tells the Buddha, yes, one day we will all die, even rich and famous people. And Channa really liked the Buddha a lot, but he was schooling him in the ways of the world. Prince Siddhartha is very isolated and naive. And then this is the happy part of the story. Sometimes this part of the story gets left out. Several days later, they go through the north gate, and they meet a monk right here. A spiritual seeker, somebody who's on the path. And Siddhartha is kind of amazed at how happy and serene and glowing this person is. He seems oblivious to the bad news of old age, sickness, and death. And Siddhartha almost wants to go up with him and say, how can you be happy? Don't you know you're going to get old, sick, and die? But he transcended that, and he lived an authentic life. And he kind of is gone beyond, he's embraced impermanence and change, and has gone beyond a fear of death. So Siddhartha, after seeing this monk, an aspiration is awoken in him to seek, and his whole life changes 180 degrees. He no longer wants to be the next king. He wants to be the next great spiritual leader. And so late at night, with Channa and Kanthaka, they go out to the edge of town. And they always say the Buddha went to the forest. And when I read that, I always think of Yosemite or Yellowstone or Mammoth. But they just mean like on the edge of town, because cities were small and they're built on rivers, and there was usually like a forest or a grove nearby. So it's not like it's very close, a lot closer than I thought. So he cuts off his royal hair, he takes off all of his robes and all of his jewelry, and he gives them to Channa, and he puts on the saffron robes and becomes a spiritual seeker at 29. So, he kind of had a midlife crisis. And Americans, because of our modern feminist viewpoint, and I think feminism is one of the most important influences on American Buddhism, but this is interesting. When we hear this story, a lot of times Americans get upset that Buddha abandoned his mother and child, but she's a princess. She's in the castle. She has servants. She's going to be okay. But in India, what people really got upset about at the time was that he went AWOL. He's a soldier. He's the next prince. And you can't just decide, oh, I don't feel like protecting my tribe anymore. I'm gonna retire from the military and go be a religious leader. And I tell people it's like if Patton or Eisenhower on D-Day, this is a little dated, but what if Dwight Eisenhower decided on D-Day he just didn't feel like it? Like, I just don't feel like landing on France today. I think I'm going to go back to Kansas and paint, right? He would have been arrested, right? What do they call that? What is that called when you betray the military? Deserter? So anyway, they were very upset. He abandoned and his people, and he rejected his caste, which is a big no-no at that time. So then, then he practices from 29 to 35, about 6 years. And the first thing he does is he practices yogic concentration with a teacher named Udaka. And so this is where you try to control your thoughts, not think negative things, think positive things. This is an idea that you can somehow control your thinking. And he has 5 students with him, 5 disciples that go and study with Uddaka. And the way the story goes is that, of course, the Buddha masters this. He's perfect at it. He completely masters this technique, but he finds it lacking because when he's not sitting in meditation, all of those feelings come rushing back to him. So it didn't have legs. It's not something that he can incorporate into his everyday life. And so it worked. Like at the yoga studio, I'm calm, but when I'm on the 405, it's gone. So he felt like it wasn't quite enough. And this is also Buddhism advertising why it's better. But it's a little bit in the story. And the other thing I read that I've been told is probably not true, but I really like it anyway. I've read some books saying that these 5 fellow disciples of the Buddha, he's not the Buddha yet, but of Siddhartha, they're fellow seekers, but there's a rumor going around in Buddhism that these 5 seekers were actually 5 bodyguards that King Suddhodana said to keep an eye on his son, because he's very vulnerable now, right? He's the prince, he's out in the middle of the wilderness, and he's very vulnerable to attack or assassination. So that sounds like something a father would do. Like he might not have been able to say, I love you, but he sent 5 big bodyguards to protect his son. And then the story is that the bodyguards actually became spiritual seekers too. So maybe not true, but I would like to think it's true. And then he decides to practice asceticism. So yogic practice is kind of a Hindu thing. Asceticism is kind of a Jainism thing. Those are the 2 major religions at the time of the Buddha. So this is ascetic practice. So you know the fat Buddha you see at the restaurants? Not Prince Siddhartha. This is what Prince Siddhartha looked like when he practiced asceticism. So he didn't eat. He only drank rainwater. He lost 30, 40, 50 pounds. He came very close to dying. So the idea is that you generate no karma if you're inactive. But the Buddha said to really completely realize total enlightenment, it seems like you have to die. And then you're dead. So you're enlightened, but you're dead. So he really thought this isn't a good idea either. And this is a lot different than monasticism. It took me a long time to figure this out. This is asceticism. You can't eat, you can't drink, you have to sit still. Monasticism is group living, living in like a dorm. There are rules in a monastery because a lot of people are living in close quarters. So when I was at UCLA, there was a rule that you weren't allowed to go out on the ledge of your dorm room for any reason. It doesn't matter. You're not allowed to go out on the ledge. And one of my friends, he accidentally closed the door, locked, and he left his keys in his room. And he could have gone downstairs and said, I forgot my key, could I have a pass key? But he didn't feel like it. So he went to the neighbor's room, he went out on the ledge, and he went around the ledge in through his window and unlocked his door, which makes, kind of makes sense and everything, but there's a rule. You're not ever allowed to do that. And I know he was kicked out of the dorms immediately. And he might have been kicked out of the school, I'm not really sure. But, we had rules because a lot of people are living in close quarters, and it's the only way to have a smoothly running monastery or dorm. So after he realizes the ultimate end of this practice is enlightenment through death, he rejects. So now he's rejected being a prince. He's rejected Hindu yogic practice, and now he's rejecting asceticism. So he's kind of a 3-time loser. This is bad. He's done it. He's tried 3 big things, and he's failed at all 3. So he decides to sit under a tree and meditate. And he wants to get his health back. And he starts to eat, and he bathes. And he's so weak, he almost drowns. And then this woman, Sujata, sees him and brings him sweetened milk, like a vanilla milkshake. So he hasn't eaten for like 2 or 3 years, and he gets this wonderful vanilla milkshake. He gets all of his energy back. But one of the big things about this that's bad is he's broken his ascetic vows. The 5 disciples reject him. And this is like 4 times bad for an ascetic because he's taking food from a woman who's really super cute and young and single. 5, so when they write these stories, this is an important narrative element. This is wrong for like so many reasons. This is so unesthetic of him. And then early in the morning, after meditating for a long period of time, he realizes nirvana. At the morning, they think maybe it was Venus was rising in the night sky. So this is always called awakening in the morning under the Bodhi tree. And this is the event we celebrate on December 8th. So he had an aspiration when he sees the monk, and then he realizes partial awakening, not complete awakening, but he realizes awakening under the Bodhi tree. And then he goes on and practices for 45 years by teaching. So he continues his practice after realizing partial awakening. And then after awakening, he meets his original 5 students, and they see that he seems alive and well, and he's figured it out. And he gives his first Dharma talk. First we have the Buddha under the Bodhi tree. Now we have the Dharma, because he gives the first Dharma talk with the Four Noble Truths. And then these 5 become part of his Sangha, and he tells them to go out and spread the teachings of Buddhism. And so these are the 3 jewels: the Buddha, and then the Dharma, and then the Sangha, in that order. And then the Buddha said the 2 most important meals in his life were the meals he got from Suddhodana, because it led to his initial awakening, and this last meal that he has at 80 from Kunda, who is a blacksmith. And this is probably not an appropriate joke, but if a blacksmith cooks you dinner, you got to be a little wary. So it's not Kunda's fault, but there was something. The Buddha was old. He was weak. He said his body was creaking like an old cart, and he knew death was coming. But he ate this meal of pork, and they think it maybe have gone bad. He got food poisoning, and he had a very human death, not like Jesus. It wasn't miraculous. He gets diarrhea, stomach cramps. He's in pain for a couple days, and he lies down with his head to the north, looking to the western Pure Land, and he dies a parinirvana, complete and total awakening, in the evening. And all of his monks are around him, and he basically says, he says, if you want to see the true me, it's in my teachings, it's in the Dharma, it's not in my body. And so what he really does is he doesn't name a personal successor. He names the Dharma, the teachings, as what will carry on his work. And so he dies at 80 years old and realizes complete and total nirvana. So my time is running short, but I wanted to make a couple comments. One is, I think it's important for every Buddhist school and tradition to be able to map their tradition onto this life story. So, I play with this a lot. Like when the Buddha meets the monk, his Hongan is awoken, his aspiration to seek, and his partial enlightenment under the Bodhi tree is his Shinjin. And then before he dies, he's facing the way. This is just general Buddhism. I'm not editing the story. The Buddha's facing west, looking towards the Western Pure Land. Right before he dies, he realizes complete and total awakening. So there's actually 2 enlightenment events. There's the one at 35, and then there's the one at 80. And so I think our tradition maps very well onto this narrative. And then I think it's important for us as people to map your life onto this narrative. Like maybe what was the thing in your life that got you to seek? Maybe it was a death in the family. Maybe it was a career change. Maybe you got laid off. There's something in your life that awoken a desire to seek and to practice on the way the Buddha does. And so I think it's important. So this story isn't really told for historical reasons. It's told as a model or a narrative that we can emulate in our own lives. This is the trajectory that all people have on the Buddhist path. It's just that the details change, but the basic story is the same. So, happy Bodhi Day. Thank you very much. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu. Naman Dabutsu. Naman Dabutsu.